Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder if feeling anxious or sad makes you more likely to get angry or act out aggressively? Or if being aggressive makes you feel more down or worried? It is a question that touches on how our emotions and behaviors are connected. And a recent study published in the Journal of Affective Disorders, which we'll be talking about today, really dug into this. So, a group of researchers named Wei and their colleagues looked at a study that investigated this connection. They used something called cross-lagged panel network, or CLPN models. Now, that sounds super fancy, but basically they were tracking a group of teenagers over time, gathering information about their internalizing problems, which includes things like anxiety and depressive symptoms, and also about their aggression. They wanted to see if changes in one area predicted later changes in the other. Wei and their team found some results that suggested a sort of negative feedback loop. This means their findings implied that if you have more internalizing problems, it might lead to more aggression later on. And conversely, if you become more aggressive, it might lead to more internalizing problems later on. They felt this was a significant discovery about how these two aspects of mental well-being can influence each other over time. But here is where things get really interesting. The authors of the paper we're discussing today, Kimmo Sorjonen, Melin, and Marika Melin, took a closer look. They thought, hold on a second, are these findings as solid as they seem? They pointed out that the methods used, like the traditional cross-lagged panel model, and even the newer CLPN model, can sometimes lead to findings that look real but aren't. It is like a trick of the statistics, where the way the data is analyzed makes it seem like there is a connection when, in reality, it might just be a coincidence or due to other hidden factors. Think of it this way. Imagine you have a bunch of apples and oranges. If you just look at them, you might think they're related because they're both fruits. But if you start digging deeper, you realize they're quite different. Similarly, statistical models, even complex ones, can sometimes see connections that aren't truly there in a meaningful way. This is what the commentators suspected might be happening with the Wei et al. Study. They used the term spurious findings, which essentially means findings that appear to be true but are not due to methodological flaws or other unmeasured influences. To test their hunch, Sorjonen and colleagues did something really smart. They couldn't get the original data from Wei et al., which is a common hurdle in science, so they created their own data using computer simulations. They made sure the simulated data was very similar to the kind of data Wei et al. Used in terms of sample size and how the different scores related to each other. Then they analyzed this simulated data using different statistical approaches. And what they found was quite revealing. When they used different ways to look at the data, they saw different things. Sometimes it looked like there were positive effects, meaning internalizing symptoms and aggression seemed to make each other worse, like a vicious cycle. However, in other models they tried, and especially when they looked at the overall picture by averaging all their findings, the effects often disappeared. It was like looking at the same information through different lenses, and each lens showed a slightly different, sometimes contradictory, story. The meta-analytic poolings, which is basically a way to combine results from multiple analyses to get a more reliable estimate, tended to show that the links between internalizing problems and aggression weren't significantly different from zero. What does not significantly different from zero mean? Well, imagine a flukometer, a P. Value tells us how likely a result is just a random fluke. If the p-value is high, meaning the flukometer is showing a big number, it suggests the result could easily be due to chance. In this case, their combined results suggested that the connections Wei et al. Saw might indeed have been a result of statistical chance rather than a true underlying relationship. This led the commentators to conclude that the findings by Wei et al. Might have been spurious, meaning they were mistaken, and their conclusions about a negative feedback loop were premature. It is a strong statement, and it highlights a crucial point in scientific research. Even sophisticated statistical models can sometimes lead us astray if we're not careful. This is a really important takeaway for all of us, not just scientists. In observational research, meaning studies where we're just observing and not manipulating anything, correlations and even adjusted cross-lagged effects can be misleading. It is easy to overinterpret things and see connections that aren't really there. This is why it is so important for researchers to be critical and to scrutinize their findings. Sorjonen and their colleagues recommend a way forward. They suggest that when researchers find cross-lagged effects, they should indeed test them using alternative models just as they did. They should look at the data from multiple angles and then compare the results. It is about building a stronger case by seeing if the findings hold up under different analytical approaches. This is what they call a juxtaposition of findings, putting different analyses side by side to see the whole picture. So, what does this mean for you and me? It means we should approach sensational findings about psychological connections with a healthy dose of skepticism. While it is possible that internalizing problems and aggression are linked to this particular study, when re-examined, doesn't provide the definitive proof that was initially claimed. The complexity of human emotions and behavior means we need incredibly robust evidence before drawing firm conclusions about cause and effect. This paper is a fantastic example of the scientific process in action. It shows how researchers build upon and sometimes question previous work. The commentary by Sorjonen and colleagues isn't about discrediting Wei et al., but rather about urging for more rigorous scrutiny of findings, especially when using complex statistical techniques. It's a reminder that science is a journey of questioning, testing, and refining our understanding. My take on this is that this is a crucial reminder about the limits of observational data and the importance of statistical rigor. While the idea of a negative feedback loop between internalizing problems and aggression is compelling and potentially very important for understanding mental health, this particular piece of evidence, when scrutinized, isn't as strong as it initially seemed. Future research might need to employ different designs, perhaps more experimental ones, or very carefully constructed longitudinal studies with even more sophisticated analytical techniques to truly untangle these complex relationships. What is the so what for us? It encourages us to be critical consumers of information, especially when it comes to our mental health. It's important to remember that correlation does not equal causation. Just because two things tend to happen together, or one seems to follow the other in a dataset, doesn't mean one is directly causing the other. There could be many other factors at play. So, the next time you hear about a breakthrough study on a psychological phenomenon, remember the story of this paper. Remember the importance of looking at the methods, considering alternative explanations, and understanding that science is a continuous process of investigation and self-correction. If you found this breakdown helpful, please give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment below with your thoughts on this research, and don't forget to subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more deep dives into the fascinating world of psychology. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.